Hello, my name is Nicholas Bishop. I'm a faculty member here at Texas State University in the Human Development and Family Sciences program. I'm excited to present research that I've collaboratively produced with faculty members at University of Texas in San Antonio as well as UT Austin, members of the Graduate School of Social Work at University of Denver, as well as graduate students in our Human Development and Family Sciences program. The primary goal of our research was to identify whether dietary quality modifies the association between multimorbidity, or reporting multiple chronic conditions, and change in mobility limitations. Mobility limitations are indicators of physical disability, and they include questions talking about how an adult interacts with their environment. So things like, can an older adult stoop or crouch, climb one flight of stairs, lift weights more than 10 pounds. So we focused on an aging population because we both have changes in our population age structure where a greater proportion of our population is represented by older adults. And we also are seeing that more recently born older adults actually have greater morbidity burden than younger born older adults. So this is something related to birth cohort. So this is why we focus on older adults, because they're a very at-risk population, and we want to identify potentially modifiable risk factors that we can influence and change in the life of the older adult and find points of intervention to reduce the burden of chronic disease on our aging population. This study used data from the Health and Retirement Study, which is a nationally representative longitudinal study of aging, and a sub-study of the Health and Retirement Study, which is the Healthcare and Nutrition Study. The Healthcare and Nutrition Study measured dietary intake on a subsample of respondents to the Health and Retirement Study. Our analyses included around 3,000 older adults age 65 and older in 2012. And we looked at change in mobility from 2012 to 2014. So change in mobility was regressed on multimorbidity, which is the reported number of chronic conditions from a list of 8 possible chronic conditions, as well as an indicator of dietary quality as identified by the Alternative Healthy Eating Index 2010. Our analyses were primarily regression-based, and we included multiple covariates to adjust for potential confounding. Because this is an observational study, we want to make the internal validity or our ability to identify causal associations as strong as possible. The study itself identified and confirmed previous findings that dietary quality does predict likelihood of mobility limitations, both at baseline, which was 2012 in our study, as well as change in mobility limitations from 2012 to 2014. What's more exciting about our study is that we identified that dietary quality actually moderates or modifies the association between multimorbidity and change in mobility limitations. So let me zoom into our figure here. Try to make this look as good as possible with the video I have going. So what we're looking at is what's called a Johnson-Niemann plot, and this plot is actually a plot on the on the y-axis. We actually have the slope of multimorbidity, so this is actually a statistical estimate. So the estimate of how multimorbidity is associated with change in mobility limitations. And on the x-axis, we have our moderator, which was the Alternative Healthy Eating Index score. So what we see is at the mean centered value of Alternative Healthy Eating Index, which was around 57, and below, there's not an association between multimorbidity and change in mobility limitations. So older adults who have moderate to low dietary quality, multimorbidity did not predict change in their mobility limitations. On the right-hand side of the mean-centered x-axis here, we actually do see a significant positive association between multimorbidity and change in mobility limitations. So what these findings suggest are that older adults that have low dietary quality, they have potentially pre-existing conditions, and using a life course perspective, they've likely been exposed to environments of poverty, disparities that have increased their likelihood of developing multimorbidity and mobility limitations before inclusion in our study. On the other hand, we have older adults who are reporting healthy eating and healthy dietary intake, and these are the ones that we actually see that there's a potential intervenable point that we could potentially modify. So these older adults with better dietary quality, we want to identify those older adults, because if we can then focus on their host and set of chronic conditions, we might be able to reduce progression of multimorbidity and therefore reduce the likelihood that they develop mobility limitations. And with reduction of the burden of disability in the older population, we can actually reduce the burden of chronic disease and aging on our population and help promote better health. Thank you for your participation in this poster, and have a great day.